John Schneider has been known to throw a curveball a time or two as general manager of the Seahawks, but he did something on Sunday that even seemed out of the ordinary for him. What's with Noah Fant getting released 2 days before the start of training camp? I'm going to be diving into that key storyline on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, and a special thanks to all of our listeners that make Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're listening in Payette, Idaho, or Council Bluffs, Iowa, we appreciate each and every one of you. We're 2 days away from the start of Seahawks training camp, the first practice coming up on Wednesday, and John Schneider made sure to put a little bit of unexpected news on the table leading up to that first practice. I'm going to be diving into the decision to release Noah Fant, why it happened, what it means for this football team. Then we've got a Monday mailbag, and I'll be continuing our 90-man countdown, numbers 8 through 5. We're in the final 8 of our top 90 countdown heading into Wednesday's practice. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Noah Fant was one of the heavily speculated names that could be a cap casualty back in February and early March, along with Tyler Lockett, Draymond Jones, and some players that actually ended up being released before the start of free agency. But Noah Fant was kept by the Seahawks despite having an $8.9 million salary for the upcoming season, and he remained on the roster up until Sunday. He was involved at OTAs and minicamp, seemed to be perfectly content still being in Seattle. There wasn't any sign of animosity or unhappiness, but on Sunday, news broke that John Schneider, doing something that is a little bit out of the ordinary for him, released Fant just a couple days before the start of training camp. And the first thing that came to my mind, I'm somebody that, having covered this team for a long time, been covering John Schneider for a long time, I know that John Schneider is one of those general managers that will throw some curveballs, and I'm prepared for those, whether it's a splashy trade, picking somebody in the first or second round that you haven't heard of or that you thought was a later round pick. He has done plenty of things like that, and he has certainly released aging players as cap casualties. He did a number of times this offseason with players like Lockett and Jones. But when it comes to a player in his prime like Noah Fant, who's got 1 year left on his deal, the fact that nothing had happened up to this point throughout the entire offseason, I thought maybe there was a possibility he could get moved in training camp if a team had a tight end go down. That might be the team that's willing to take on his salary for 2025. But I was not anticipating that this was going to happen, where we were going to see Noah Fant 2 days before the start of training camp get released. I just did not see this happening. Of course, there's plenty of obvious reasons to look at why the Seahawks would choose to do this. The first thing is that $8.9 million price point. It was a non-guaranteed 2025 contract, but if he's on the roster in week 1, Noah Fant is going to get that $8.9 million. So you can look at the $8.9 million reasons why John Schneider would do this. Again, but he could have done this earlier. This could have been done as a post-June 1st move. It could have been done back in March to give Noah Fant a true chance to hit free agency, something that he has never done in his career. I would be really curious to know what those conversations were like behind closed doors in the past couple months. You have to believe that Fant was having some open communications with the front office, because this just seemed like it really came out of nowhere. There had to be some idea behind the scenes that this was something that could happen. And maybe Noah Fant, and this is just speculation, I haven't got any sourcing on this, but maybe Noah Fant has been having conversations with the Seahawks since they drafted Elijah Arroyo. That's the other obvious factor here, is using the 50th overall pick on another athletic pass-catching tight end that can stretch the field and does a lot of the things that Noah Fant is supposed to do and may have a higher ceiling. And, of course, he's much cheaper on a 4-year slotted rookie contract. But my viewpoint on this was that, look, Seattle had almost $28 million in cap space before it made this move. It's not like John Schneider desperately needed some cap space. Even if they were going to go out and make a big move, I'm sure we'll talk more about that as this show goes. But even if they were going to do that, they could do it with Noah Fant's contract on the books. And it's not like having 3 tight ends that are good is a bad thing. If you had Fant on the roster, but he was your second or third tight end, I know it's an expensive player for that, but you could still get contributions from him, and Elijah Arroyo and A.J. Barner could do their thing. Clint Kubiak historically has used a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets, so there would have been somewhere for him, you would think. But the way that this has gone down, the timing of this ordeal, it is not ideal for the player at all. You're 2 days away from training camp. Some teams already have got veterans that are on the practice field. There will be teams that are interested in Noah Fant because he's still a young player. He's still in the prime of his career, and there have been flashes. The touchdowns have not been there, but he's had a couple decent seasons in Seattle. There will be teams, first-round picks that have athletic talent and the tools that Noah Fant have. They're going to keep getting chances to show what they can do. So he is going to get plucked up, but he ain't going to be getting big money. He might have been able to get a pretty nice contract. I don't know if he gets another $21 million for a 2-year deal like he got with Seattle a couple off seasons ago, but I think if he's a free agent, I think that there's going to be plenty of interest and it's going to drum up a pretty nice contract. He's not going to be getting that kind of money now. He's probably looking at an incentives-based deal, but it could be a better opportunity for him to be a featured target at the tight end position, whereas A.J. Barner had 4 touchdowns last year. He's already shown he's a better receiver than people advertise coming out of college. And Elijah Arroyo, that's his game. He's a pass-catching tight end that can win down the seam. He can create after the catch. They've even talked about him being an X sometimes as a big-bodied receiver. So the fluidity of him athletically, the soft hands, he does a lot of the things the Seahawks thought that Noah Fant was going to do. So from that perspective, I'm not surprised that Noah Fant is not going to be with the Seahawks. It's just the timing of this. I didn't think that we would be at this stage of the offseason and this would end up happening. My belief is that this is one of those cases, and this is 99% of the time when you have a player that gets cut like this before training camp. 99% of the time, the player has either gone to management and said, I want a trade. I request to be traded elsewhere. I would like to be released. And the front office tries to find a suitor because the Seahawks would have loved to get something for Noah Fant instead of just cutting him outright and not getting anything in return. If they could have even got a 7th-round pick, at least you're getting something for somebody to take his contract. But clearly none of those deals were out there. Once the Miami Dolphins were off the table, that was the team that I talked about a lot in the show. When they traded Jonnu Smith last month as part of the Jalen Ramsey deal to the Steelers, that left a huge hole at tight end. And I thought for sure that Seattle would be calling, and I'm sure that John Schneider reached out to the Miami Dolphins about interest in Noah Fant. But they were able to get Darren Waller to come out of retirement for a $2 million 1-year deal, way cheaper. And he's a player that, if he still has it, has been more productive. He's had better seasons as a pass catcher than what Noah Fant has had. So you can't blame Miami at all there. I think the Dolphins being off the board, there just isn't anybody that wants to absorb this contract, even on a 1-year deal. They don't want to absorb that and give up something for him. So there clearly wasn't a trade. So this feels like it is an and/or type thing where you had the player, and who knows, maybe the player had nothing to do with this. Maybe the Seahawks just came to him and said, hey, we're going to be exploring trading you because we don't view you as part of our future, or we think that we have another young guy that's ready to take that spot. Who knows how these conversations went down? Normally, John Schneider's pretty transparent on some of this stuff with his players. But either way, the way that it looks to me from the outside looking in and just kind of some of the things that were mentioned early in the offseason, it feels like the Seahawks kind of had an idea that they wanted to move on, especially once they drafted Arroyo, but there weren't the trade offers there. And now you're at a point where instead of just dragging this out and potentially having an unhappy player in the locker room and on the field, you just move on. And unfortunately, the Seahawks aren't going to get anything back in return, but you get this clean split. None of that money was guaranteed, that $8.9 million. So Noah Fant, he's out. You now have even more cap space. I don't know if they have any ideas what they're going to be doing with it. It's not something that I think is going to impact extensions necessarily. I may explain more on that later. But to me, this is just a case where clearly the Seahawks liked the other 2 young tight ends that they have. And at the price point that Noah Fant was at, they were hoping they could move him. They were hoping that because he's still a fairly young player himself, he's a former first-round pick, they were hoping somebody would take the bait and they would make the trade and they could get a draft pick for him. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So that's where we're at now. Noah Fant released by the Seahawks. I'm surprised the timing of it. Again, this is very uncharacteristic for John Schneider with this type of situation. You know, if Noah Fant had been in trouble with the law or there were some other things going on, then maybe it'd be a little bit more understandable. But this timing is definitely not good for the player. And I don't know that it's good for the Seahawks necessarily, but they're moving on. It's the A.J. Barner and Elijah Arroyo show now. Those are the tight ends. And the Seahawks do have a little more financial flexibility if John Schneider wants to flex his trade muscles a little bit and go out there and see if there is something available that can help improve this football team. But clearly, it's a youth movement at tight end. Clint Kubiak wants to go with those guys as his tight ends. And maybe now Eric Salbert becomes the number 3, a guy that's familiar with this scheme and is better known for his blocking, can play special teams. Not near the player that Noah Fant is, but he's a cheap one-year vet that knows the system and he can do the dirty work. That may be what they want out of their number 3 tight end at this point. When I come back, it's Monday mailbag time. We got plenty of questions from you, the valued 12s. I'll get to those up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights like me, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get into the game while your friends are getting burned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track all of my favorite matchups, particularly during baseball season, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's so easy to use, payout is fast, and you can make even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If I think George Springer is going to stay red hot and hit another home run for the Blue Jays, I can bet on it without a hitch. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small, whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. That's where BetterHelp comes in. Therapy can help you set the healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life once you get home. The flexibility of online therapy makes it easy to fit sessions into a busy schedule no matter where you are. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can help provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in 2 days away from the start of training camp. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we do every Monday, it's time to open up the mailbag. I'm not going to say we're going into regular season mode just yet, but we're going to start heading that direction now that training camp is starting this week. So as we do every Monday, time to pull out your questions. The first one here coming off of X from DJ Melwap. Although both are a possibility, which is more likely? All this cap space is used to start re-signing key guys or to try and swing a big trade. So if Noah Fant had more than 1 year on his deal, I would be leaning towards the extension thing. But this did not help the Seahawks cap space for 2026 and 2027 or 2028. That is when extensions for players like Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Riq Woolen, that's when they are going to have new money in 2026, 2027, 2028. So this doesn't do anything for that. What this gives the Seahawks is an extra $8.9 million in cap space that can be used right now. And so re-signing players, I don't see this being something that's going to help with that. At least in future, this is not taking any money off the books. But right now, you could reinvest that $8.9 million if you decided, you know what, I want to go out and trade for a Trey Hendrickson. You could go do that if the Bengals were actually willing to listen, or maybe you want to go out and look at a receiver to add to this group. There's a number of players that they could discuss with teams, but that might be something that John Schneider could do. This also might have just been a case where, well, we didn't need the cap savings, as I mentioned, but we've got an unhappy player. He's in the last year of his contract. We don't think he's going to be our number 1 or 2 tight end at this point. So both sides, we just decided we're going to have a clean split here. So I don't even know that it is a precursor to another move. But if it is, I would think it's going to be a trade of some sort, because right now that's where the cap space is saved. It's not for future seasons where you're going to be giving new contracts to your 2022 draft class. So I think trades or signing somebody in free agency right now, maybe that would make some sense as well. Next question here from Salva Truco on X. After the Fant trade, is John Schneider opening more cap space up to take a swing at Micah Parsons? Adden Durde was his D-line coach in Dallas. Could a reunion be on tap? I don't like to ever take pipe dreams or dreams that fans have. I don't like to get a bucket of water and pour it on fans. And look, we know John Schneider has done some splashy things in his career, whether it's the Jamal Adams trade, Jimmy Graham trade, bringing in Percy Harvin. Graham was the only one of those 3 that ended up working out for more than a season, unfortunately, because of injuries or things going on in the locker room. But I don't think that's going to stop John Schneider from investigating the possibility of making some big trades right now. That being said, even with how Dallas is handling the Micah Parsons situation, I can't see Jerry Jones letting Micah Parsons get away. I cannot see that happening. If there was a team, if he became available, if there was a team that would make sense, I think he would love to go back, even with the playful jabs he and DeMarcus Lawrence had this offseason on social media, with Lawrence saying that basically that Seattle provided a better chance to contend. Micah Parsons didn't seem too happy about that comment, but I think he would love to play with DeMarcus Lawrence again, and I think he would love to play for Adden Durde again, who he had some fantastic seasons to open his career with when they were working together, and Durde was Dallas's defensive line coach. So I get the idea. I get why fans would be excited about that prospect. And you're talking about a 26-year-old player, so significantly younger than, say, a Trey Hendrickson, is in the prime of his career, perennial all-pro caliber player. He'd be the true blue-chip edge that they don't have right now. They have some really good ones. They just don't have that superstar edge. But I'm going to throw the bucket of water on top. I don't see any way that this happens. This extra cap space would allow them to be able to do an extension with him if they made the trade. But you're talking all the draft capital they have to give up and then do that. And I don't think Dallas is even going to entertain that. So let's continue to live in Madden fantasy land on that regard. I don't see that being something that's realistic. Morgan on Blue Sky. How much does Uchenna Nwosu's injury weigh into the possibility of signing someone like Jadeveon Clowney? Do you have confidence he's ready for week 1? So obviously, if Uchenna Nwosu, if you have doubts that he's going to be ready for the start of the season, because he's on the PUP list right now, he'd have to miss the first 4 games of the year if he's still on the PUP list when the season starts. My understanding is Seattle is not concerned at all that is going to happen. This is more of, we are taking it very precautionary with him because the injuries he's had the last couple of years. We want to make sure he's all the way back. And I can tell you one thing, I will be stunned, and maybe the Seahawks will surprise me here because they want to get him some reps since he hasn't played a lot the last few years. But after having that knee sprain from the Wyatt Teller chop block last year in a preseason game, I am not expecting that we are going to see number 10 suit up for any snaps in preseason games. But my understanding is that the Seahawks believe there's a very good chance, they're very confident that he is going to be ready for week 1. Might be ready to practice within a week or so after training camp starts. They're kind of playing that by ear right now, but this doesn't feel like something where they're really worried that this could linger well into the season. So I would expect, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think he will be in uniform and he will be playing against the 49ers in week 1, but we shall see what things look like. If his health is not trending in the right direction and they have any pessimism about that, then maybe that gives you more incentive to go out and get a Jadeveon Clowney or somebody like that, instead of, well, let's go trade a bunch of draft assets and then give a huge contract to Trey Hendrickson. I'm not saying I'm against that idea, but if you're wanting something that's more affordable and you don't have to give up draft picks, Clowney makes some sense. There's a few other edges that are out there that have done some things in the league as well, but Nwosu's health is definitely going to bear on that. Can't think of a better name on YouTube. What would it take from Jalen Milroe in training camp in the preseason to be Seattle's second quarterback and potentially lead to Drew Lock's release? So I don't see any way that Drew Lock is getting released, but I'm going to say this right now. NFL news that I think is pertinent to a team like the Seahawks. The Tennessee Titans today announced that quarterback Will Levis is going to undergo shoulder surgery. His season is over before it even gets started. Levis was expected to be the backup to number 1 overall pick Cam Ward. Now the Titans are going to have to move a different direction at the backup quarterback job. If Jalen Milroe goes out in the preseason and just absolutely balls, has a great training camp, and the Seahawks are like, man, this kid's way ahead of schedule where we thought he was going to be. And no offense to Drew Lock, but he's a middle of the pack not old by any means, but late 20s quarterback. Seattle at that point might be like, hey, Tennessee, are you interested? Because Drew Lock would easily be the best backup quarterback. I think he'd be the better backup quarterback over Will Levis if Levis is healthy. But now that Levis is out and you don't have him for the season, there will be other teams that'll have injury issues too. So I think injuries could create a trade market where you could get a late round pick for Drew Lock because he has started quite a few games in the league and he's still a relatively young player who has done some nice things the last couple of years when he's had his chances to play in Seattle and in New York. So I think that the chance of that happening as far as a release is pretty much none. I think the Seahawks would keep their 3 quarterbacks. Maybe Drew Lock is your number 3 guy, but I think a trade is definitely a possibility, especially with this news now with the Tennessee Titans. Milroe is going to have to go out and prove himself, though, in actual game action and see where he fits into the mix here before Seattle is comfortable doing something like that at this stage. Sea Cyclones on Blue Sky. Whoever does not win the starting fullback role between Brady Russell and Robbie Oots, do you think the Seahawks will be able to sneak him on the practice squad, or will he likely be picked off waiver claims? So I'm going to throw another wrinkle into this question. Brady Russell might be the 3rd best tight end now on Seattle's roster. This may open up the window where you say, okay, Robbie Oots, you are our fullback. Brady Russell, you are now going back to tight end. He can play fullback in a pinch. He's done it before, but you're going to be our number 3 tight end. In fact, I would be very comfortable with that idea, because I think Brady Russell has a little bit of ability as a pass catcher. If you use him in that capacity, he gets after it as a blocker. Obviously a fantastic special teams player. So now the door is squarely open for both these guys to be on the roster, whereas with Noah Fant on the roster, I would think, well, this is really whoever wins it is going to be on the roster and the other guy probably isn't. Now I think you have a really good chance that you could potentially have Robbie Oots and Brady Russell both on the roster. But in the event one of them does get cut, I think because fullbacks are only used by a handful of teams, maybe there's some confidence you could get Oots to the practice squad. But I think there's a lot of teams out there that would be very intrigued about adding him as a tight end even. And he's a good special teams player, so there'd be risk there. I actually think Brady Russell would be the safer bet because he's a former undrafted guy. I think he'd be the safer bet that you can get him onto your practice squad if one of those players is not going to be on your roster. I think it'd be really risky to put Robbie Oots on the waiver wire. Our last question here from Dayton on Blue Sky. Do you still maybe see a fit for Amari Cooper in this receiving core? Does it make sense in Kubiak's offense? I've talked about this really since Kubiak was hired. I know that he is not the player that he once was. I don't think he is a 1,200-yard receiver that can give you double-digit touchdown catches. I don't think he has the burst that he once did. But I still think Amari Cooper can contribute. And I think that this would be an offense because he can be a chain mover. He still has some ability to win downfield, a reliable receiver that's a savvy route runner. I could still see there being a pathway at the right price that Seattle could consider that with the big losses that they had at receiver. I think that he does some things that are a little different than Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp, but he's still not that field stretcher. So that's really where Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Torrey Horton, the 5th-round pick out of Colorado State, come into play. At this point, I would say it's probably not going to happen, but I could see the fit if Seattle gets a week into training camp and Cooper remains unsigned. They're like, look, we've now had a chance to see what this group looks like. We think we need a little more ammunition, more proven commodities out there. Then Amari Cooper could make sense. But right now, I would say I probably don't see it happening. Not because I don't think it's a fit. I just think at this point, Seattle, I don't know that he really moves the needle that much, and they've got some young guys that they really need to see whether those players can step in, like a Torrey Horton or a Ricky White III. Can you step into the offense and give us contributions early on a rookie contract when there's upside, when you clearly don't have that anymore at this point with Amari Cooper? When I come back, we've got numbers 8 through 5 on our 90-man countdown as we near the top of the list. I'll be breaking down those 4 players coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Rougiette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast in an average of 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked for you, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support. At the start of the show, we were just 6 subscribers away from 20K on YouTube. Let's get past the finish line, 12s. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to click the subscribe button for Locked On Seahawks 5 days a week. Season getting started. It's going to be 6 or 7 episodes a week. We're really fired up to get this new season rolling, so make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube. Continuing our 90-man countdown, we are near the finish line. We're inside the top 10. The top 10 most valuable or most important Seahawks going into the 2025 season. And kicking off cluster 8 through 5 is a player who I think there still may be a chance before training camp opens in a couple days that we could hear about an extension, and that is tackle Charles Cross. Now, to this point, the former top 10 pick, he's been good. He has not been great. There have been flashes of greatness, including the first 4 or 5 games last year. I really thought that Charles Cross was on the verge of that breakout year last season, and I think that things regressed a little bit, in large part because of circumstances that were not completely in his control. He was playing on an offensive line that had major issues at other positions. They were slinging the rock a bunch. They weren't running the football to have balance offensively. So Charles Cross was getting put on an island a lot, and that led to high pressure numbers and high sack numbers. But if you turn on the film, there's a lot of really encouraging things to see. And I think in this offense, this zone-heavy offense, as athletic as Charles Cross is, I think he is a very natural fit, and I really like pairing him with John Benton. I think this is the kind of player that John Benton historically has had a lot of success being able to pull out the potential of players like this. And I think he can do that in year 4 with Charles Cross. The Seahawks have afforded themselves a little bit of wiggle room by picking up his 5th-year option, but I do think that an extension is a possibility here. If you can get that big leap from Charles Cross and he becomes a top 5, top 6 caliber left tackle, that will have domino effects on the entire rest of this offensive line. And it is going to be a huge deal for the Seahawks this season. If it flatlines, then you might start to wonder, do we want to do an extension here? I think Seattle is strongly in the camp that they want to keep him around long-term, but this is a big season. It's an important one for him at that blind side protecting position for the Seahawks to show that he is worthy of a big contract as a franchise left tackle. Going to the other side of the ball, another player who is up on the final year of his rookie deal, doesn't have a 5th-year option because he was a 5th-round pick. Riq Woolen, I don't even like using the word that he's been an enigma, because I think that that's understating how good he has been. And I've been critical about some things in his game. I think that the tackle misses have certainly been an issue. The occasional lapse in assignments that has led to big plays. He's given up quite a few touchdowns his first 3 seasons. there are things that you can nitpick about, especially if you're looking at a top 5, top 10 payday at corner. There are some things that make you hesitate a little bit. But I also think that a lot of fans have been really harsh on Riq Woolen. I mean, especially last year, he had double-digit pass breakups and 3 interceptions. I know he gave up quite a few touchdowns, but his tackle numbers were better. He had a lower missed tackle rate. I think that there was a heck of a lot more good than there was bad with Riq Woolen last year. The year before, it felt more mid-ground. I thought 2023 was a rough season in a lot of regards for him, in a sophomore slump, so to speak, after that phenomenal rookie year that he had. But I don't think calling him an enigma is an appropriate characterization, because I think he's been a lot better than that. I don't know if he's been good enough that you want to put $20+ million per year into him. That's something the Seahawks are going to have to figure out, and maybe that's what they're holding off on right now as far as contracts go. But I do think going into year 2 with Mike Macdonald, he's going to have a better idea how this scheme works, where he fits into it. I think Mike Macdonald's going to have a better idea how to maximize his tools. And there's a lot to play for. He has a lot on the line with this being the last year of his deal. So I think Riq Woolen is going into this very motivated with a chip on his shoulder, like, hey, I want to be one of the highest paid cornerbacks in the NFL. I want to be one of the foundational pieces of this defense. And talking to people in the building, the understanding is that he wants to be a Seahawk long-term. This is not a situation where he's super eager to hit the free agent market, but he wants to be paid what he is worth. And the Seahawks right now are trying to figure out what that is. So he is another guy that is really important to Seattle's ceiling on defense, because I think if we see Riq Woolen really put it together, he is capable of having a special 2025 season, and that can make a really good defense elite in 2025. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with this latest opportunity in Mike Macdonald's defense. And I think he's going to be critical in that secondary. Another player that we know is critical for the Seahawks on defense, we saw it with the results. Ernest Jones coming over in a midseason trade from the Titans last year. The defense went from being a middle of the pack, bottom half defense to being a top 5 scoring defense with Ernest Jones in the lineup. Just his ability to fly around the field, sideline to sideline, his coverage skills, interceptions, you can blitz him. And I think just the confidence, the swagger that he plays with, it really rubbed off on his teammates, including young Tyrese Knight next to him. And now you get a full season with him having a new 3-year contract. You get a full season with him in this defense. Even more mad experiments from Mike Macdonald figuring out how he can make this player a special one. And it's amazing to me he hasn't been a Pro Bowler to this point. I think that this could be the year that we see that maybe he's in the mix for an All-Pro. And for Seattle's defense to reach its potential, he's got to play at the level he was at last year in the half season, or take it to another level. And I think he's more than capable. He's only 25 years old. And I think that his coverage game is especially where I think there's still room for him to make improvements. I love him as a run defender. I think he does a great job of reading his keys. He's physical for a player of his size. There's a lot to like about him. This guy transformed Seattle's defense for the second half last year. I can't wait to see what he does with a full season in this defense. And on the back end, this is mostly a defensive segment, but Julian Love at the safety position, it does feel like we are starting to see Love get the love that he deserves. He was listed on the top 10 safeties on ESPN's poll that they do every year with executives and coaches. So he's clearly getting the respect now that he deserves. This is a guy that can play both safety positions. He can play in the slot. He could play outside corner if you needed him to. That's where he played at Notre Dame. Incredibly versatile, incredibly smart, incredibly instinctive. He'll come up and make plays as a blitzer. He'll make plays in the run game, and he is beloved in the locker room. I'm wondering what that next step looks like for Julian Love in year 2 in this scheme. And I keep mentioning year 2, how big it is, how complicated this defense is. Now these guys know what to expect. They know the system, and you can add more wrinkles to it. Julian Love is one of those guys that is going to be absorbing those wrinkles like a sponge, and he is going to be ready to take in all the lessons and all the knowledge he can from Mike Macdonald, his coaching staff. And the ball skills, the instincts he has, reading routes, being able to decipher plays, coming up and making plays as a run defender, and just his overall savvy as a teammate, making sure that his guys are lined up right. This guy's one of those coaches on the field. And so him, Ernest Jones, both those guys are going to be filling that void. Those are going to be guys that are going to be the leaders on the defense, along with Leonard Williams and Devin Witherspoon. I think those are the 4 guys that you really look to. Not that the other guys can't be leaders as well, but Those are your captains, your coaches on the field, the guys that get everybody lined up, that really set the tone. Julian Love, you can make an argument, is as much as anybody responsible for that as that do-it-all safety. So I think, hey, you're getting into the nitty-gritty of his contract. After this year, maybe he's thinking about an extension. Again, this is a great opportunity for him to take yet another step forward and make himself an all-pro caliber safety for the Seattle Seahawks in 2025. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. I'll be back with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, tomorrow. The two of us are going to be diving into some key storylines going into training camp on the offensive side of the football. And we'll have our final four in our 90-man countdown. Make sure that you are listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.